Have you ever wondered how to connect to your voice in a deeper way? In this episode, I'm talking with Chloe Rachel Gallaway about integrating, releasing, and coming to wholeness with your most powerful self through the art of writing. So, Chloe, welcome to the show.
Hi, Pamela. Thank you for having me.
Hi, it's such a joy to be on with you. And just to clarify for anyone who just watched the intro, this is actually the PA system this evening. And I am so excited to be here with you because this is a topic that I've been really excited about. I've been a lifelong writer, and I know that there's so much that I still have to learn, even though I've been doing it this long. So I really am looking forward to kind of digging in a little bit deeper and learning more about some of your processes. So I know you talk about integrating and writing. What does that really mean?
Well, I talk about integrating the story, right? And then there's layers and levels of that. But as an author and a writing coach, I think the word integrating is this idea of tying things together, of bringing things together, right? So in the process of writing story, I feel like, especially true stories. So my focus is memoir and creative nonfiction. So we're dealing with, real life stories that we've experienced. And that is another level and layer of personal emotion and energy that's stored in the body. And so when I talk about integrating, I'm talking about all this stuff. I'm talking about coming to know yourself through your story, coming to a place of awareness that you didn't have possibly, because most often we walk through life with a certain narrative that we are carrying in our head around our story. But our story is bigger than that, and it's deeper than that, and it's more than that, right? So when we're writing, we're filtering out some things and releasing those things, right? And we're embracing other things. So I think that's what it is. We're releasing things and we're embracing things. And so it's a journey of awareness on which things we're releasing and which things we're embracing, right?
I love that. I was just going to say, so really it's kind of this individual journey that you're going on anytime that you write something, whether it's, say, an article or a book.
Yes, article, book, essay. I mean, I think this is why. So if you've been working with writing your whole life, or if somebody new is coming, forward to write, there's a resistance and there is a challenge there, right? And it has to do with these dynamics that we're talking about. And it's that I'm coming to a new place, or I'm stepping into something unknown, because do I really know it before I write it? This thing is, the writing reveals it to me. That means I'm surrendering into an unknown when I write, right? So
yeah. Well, and I think that's such an interesting point, because a lot of times, we'll go into a project with an outline, so to speak, and then we'll start writing and all this other stuff comes out. And then it's like, okay, so wait a second, I've got this outline over here of what I want to say. But all this other information is coming forth. And so is that what you're referring to some degree when you're talking about the integrating? Is it the bringing that bit of ourself and adding it to whatever intention we have?
Well, I think there's that dynamic between like the pre idea, if you will, like you're saying, we have these pre-ideas, right? Or even we create blueprints and outlines possibly for something. So yeah, that's one side of it, is like the expectation, the pre-idea of something, and then learning how to let that go. But I also think there's just a deep level of emotion and emotional memory that isn't rote memory, for example. So rote memory is more like the factual side of memory, where we can tell you what happened on such and such a day. But emotional memory is much deeper, and that's what gets drawn up if we write from an emotional place, from an intuitive place, versus just a thinking place. So does that answer? Because it's kind of both things happening. It's yes, maybe you had a blueprint and you're having to let go of that a little bit, but it's really a deeper inner working of the emotions and what comes up when we allow ourselves to really voice and speak our truth and come to expression, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, and, a lot of times people struggle, say, writing a book about themselves. And I talk to friends about this, you get into your story and all these emotions start coming up. And it's like, oh my gosh, what do I do with all this now? And so I'd love for you to speak to that a little bit and how you sort of work through that in the writing process.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's just huge for anybody that comes to write memoir or true story in any form, right? Is that it starts bringing up feelings, emotions, memories. So there's a lot of things. I mean, one thing that happens to us is that creates resistance, and then we sort of stop going down the path of the writing because we don't know what the resistance can just come in all different forms, and so that can block us. That's what I actually believe writer's block is. Many different forms of resistance, right? So how can we handle that? Well, a couple of things. I think the approach that we have to writing is really important. So this is why it's so valuable for me and was valuable for me in my writing journey to understand that the emotions were there and they were part of the process. When I went into the world of writing and studied the craft of writing, the focus was very much a linear sort of left brain process where we focused on writing a good scene or writing exposition or point of view, all the different craft elements in writing. And that doesn't address the heart.
Right.
And so for me, and that's the core of my work, right, is how do we combine the craft and all the craft elements? Because I think it's really important as a writer to understand your craft and to know how to use that, but to understand the workings of the heart and how that connects to the voice and how that helps you to embody the voice and the writer and express entirely differently than you would if you just were approaching it from craft. Right? That's been my learning, really. My learning has been just in that area of diving into it. I went through that myself in authoring my own books, and this is what I teach now too. So,
well, and so to that point, when you get to that place, do you just kind of go into like stream of consciousness writing and sort of let it all come out, or, what are some of the ways that you can kind of help yourself to get beyond that point of feeling like I don't really know where to go next with something?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things with that. I'm really big in creating rituals. So I believe that the writing experience, like our state of being, impacts our action, right? That's a really important statement just for living life.
Yes.
My state of being, right, will impact my action. So, and we know this as mothers and we know this as business owners, right? But when we're writing, it's the same thing. So let's say my state of being is doubtful and fearful but oh my God, I want to do this. And I come and sit down to write. That's my state of being. It's that doubtfulness or the fear or whatever the emotion is going to impact my action on the page. So this is why ritual is so important. Because I really believe in creating rituals that bring us back to a state of being that we really want to be in before we write. So for example, just doing yoga or listening to certain types of music, things that really calm the nervous system.
Okay.
And so this is what we do in a lot of my writing classes and my retreats is we really experience that whole thing of how much control we can have with our state of being. So we do sound bath music, for example, and we do yoga and we do breath work and we do spiritual connection. And I have people actually do these feel it exercises where we walk, we walk and we breathe. We literally might stop at a plant, for example, or a tree. A lot of my stuff is done in nature because I think nature is the absolute just
love that. Yeah.
Mention and mirror
its own language. Yeah. Right.
So doing feel it's where you can feel into nature and into other things. This will calm the nervous system. The nervous system and the brain are working together, right? So you're an energy healer. You understand a lot of this from that place of calming the body and
coherence. Sure.
Is all working for you, or it can be working against you in a sense, right?
Right. Yes. Absolutely.
So, and anyway, in a nutshell, we want to really develop rituals, and sometimes they can be short little rituals. Like I use a lot of oils, right? So I was using this oil today, and I use oils that are calming, or the smell impacts me and it impacts my nervous system. It calms my body. So this is a quick, easy one to use to impact my state of being before I write. But so there's so many that we can do, honestly, but that's one way to really shape the experience of being the writer, and then that experience transforms the way you write on the page.
So I know that your life story has been very interesting, that you came from a place of being, as a child, spending a lot of time in nature, really being and,
Yes.
really connecting with nature. And so how has that shaped how you write and what you do now?
I think it was huge. The amazing thing is that when we really come to honor our story, and this is me on the book cover, right? That child did not know what a camera was, right?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I say we all have, that's the soulful child, the name of my book, and we all have this soulful child within us. And I think initially for me, I sort of had a narrative of that I was a bit disadvantaged by my childhood because I was raised in the wilderness till I was 12. I was sort of homeschooled, but it was a pretty rough life. So we were milking goats and training wild horses. And, sometimes I was out for hours during the day, climbing trees and going on these treks with my goats. And so there wasn't a lot of time for schooling in that way.
Right. So not a lot of formal education, but
not a lot of
like
formal
real life education.
And I remember, and we would write letters to my grandmother, and I would put a period after every word. So there were things like that, right? That,
sure.
My mother was very well educated, and my father too, and she was working with us as much as she could, but it was a wild life. It was a Wild West life. So
I was going to say, and your parents they just kind of decided they were going to go live in the woods, correct?
Well, if you read the book, you'll kind of see the backstory where my parents started out in San Francisco, and my dad was on the verge of fame as a musician. And so he was playing with Janis Joplin was his friend, for example, and he lived across the street from her and would go down the street to play with her. And my mother was a ballet dancer out of Houston. So they were really caught up in that wild time, and things just kind of went from one place to the next. And if you read the story, you'll find that through the craziness and the steps, they made it like to New York and then Vermont, and then they made it to the wilderness in New Mexico. So it was just a really wild ride.
Sounds like it.
and then started having children. Oh, let's just have children in the middle of the woods. This is a great plan, right? Like,
and so in your book, you tell the story of how that kind of all unfolds and how that shaped you. And so I'm curious now, when you come to your writing, how much of your writing, because obviously, again, you didn't have that formal education. So how much of your writing have you just taught yourself to do? And how much of it comes out of, sort of that space that was created in you by having that kind of experience as a child?
Yeah, right here sitting in front of you, I feel really fortunate. But it took me some time to get here, right? Like initially in my 20s, I was in college. So I did make it into the world and went into foster care and had some really hard things to overcome through my early years, right? But by the time in college, I was studying writing already. And mostly I had a lot of hangups about my writing during that time, a lot of self-judgment, and this is very common for writers, I found out. It's like, it's not just because I started school when I was 12, but see, we can all have like some kind of thing that we're hung up on.
Some story in our head. Yes.
Some story in our head. Right. And so, and of course that story is like, it's
true to us.
It's big. It's ours. Right. Like,
yes.
So for me, it was like, oh, my grammar will be the death of me. And I don't know, but I just loved writing, and I loved writing poetry. And I just, I kept at that process. And then I started studying craft, and then I really started taking it seriously. And I really, took a lot of formal writing classes, and I went to workshops with some really renowned writers. And during that process where I started really understanding the craft of writing, I also started understanding the gift of my childhood. Because my intuitive voice, my natural inclination for self-expression is really powerful.
Love that. And so this is one of the things you really focus on in your work and in your workshops, correct?
Yeah, this is why it's so important to me to balance between the two, between the intuitive voice, between the soul knowing that we all have, and the richness of the experience that we've lived, especially for some of us that have had painful experiences or are sort of, riding a lot of different waves and facets in life, that brings a richness. But initially we may have run from that or hid from that, right? And
Absolutely.
so the work really is to see the gift in that, because there's a great deal of power for writers inside of pain, inside of emotion, inside of the rawness of story. So I really want to balance that with the craft, with the refining and the polishing and, all the elements of things that are supposedly make us the great writer, right? I really think it's the alchemy of those two that make us the great writer.
And so what did that look like for you in your own life? Just, kind of moving through your own story and sort of coming out the other side.
I mean, first it was really rough, right? So first I was studying craft, and I felt like I wasn't myself. And I went to these, workshops where everything was fluorescent lighting. And I was a child that had grown up, running through hundreds of acres of wild trees and woods and climbing trees and riding horses. And, I had the essence of the experience of being just super connected to the earth, and the feeling of being free and the feeling of the wind upon my skin and all these things, right? And I felt like I was sort of pushing that away for a more sort of boxed in experience. So it was a bit of a rough ride at first, until I sort of went through this process of like, oh my God, if I'm going to own my story, I actually have to be really connected to it.
Wow.
I got to get reconnected. So in a very physical way, what I did is I went back up the mountain to the wilderness area where I had been raised. And it really became the nurturing guide underneath while I was learning craft, right? I went back up the mountain, and I literally would sit in the woods where I had my own childhood tree house. Why I needed a tree house, I don't know, because we lived in a cabin, but everybody but I had to have my own hideout away from my family.
Sure.
Even though we lived away from everybody and away from everything in the woods, right? Isn't that funny?
That was your personal place of refuge.
And I realized when I was doing that, I started having memories of like my favorite things in childhood. Like I had this whole hideout, my sister and I did, and there were 4 boys and 2 girls. So thank God I had a sister, right? And she and I had this hideout that we built. I mean, hammers and nails and boards and all this stuff as young girls. And we used to take these sheets and we would just build tents, and it would just create this amazing glowing light. And we would go inside and hang out there for hours. And
fun.
What kind of opportunity was that? I mean, I was like experiencing the sound of nature and surrounded by the mother nature, feminine, and like connecting to my intuition, constantly connecting to my intuition, right?
Wow.
So when I went back and I started feeling the story, I realized, wow, we can write from feeling versus thinking. And it just flows perfectly. It was like, all my writing teachers were like, oh, it's so hard to write a good scene. You'll have to write it 100 times. Don't be worried about how many rewrites you have to do. I always heard that. Everybody has 1,000 rewrites. And I was there. And when I was in the feeling, I would write stuff that was just first draft, and it was good.
So wow. Right. Yeah. So it really, that really is a unique gift that you were given in many senses. And so now with your own family, do you try to translate some of those things? Do you try to pass along some of those same experiences to your kids as well?
Yeah. Well, I live in the world. So I live in New Mexico still. I was born and raised on a mountain range in northern New Mexico. And now I live in Albuquerque near the base of the mountain. So I'm definitely not nearly as much in nature, even though we go out into nature regularly.
Sure.
What I think I do is I'm passing down the whole emotional literacy process of what I teach. So I openly communicate this dialogue around emotions and feelings with my 8-year-old, and have been since 3, since my daughter and my son were like 2 and 3 years old, we talked about feelings and emotions. And we talk about them in a way that was like, don't feel that, or, you're crying, let's get over it right away. I really sort of, I think, role model what I'm teaching writers and the power that we hold inside of our emotions.
I think that's so powerful, because we're sort of in this time where a lot of us have been confronted with our emotions, maybe in a different way than we might have been in the past. And then it's not just us, it's our families, it's our kids and our spouses, and we're trying to sort of manage all of these emotions. And I love this idea of, what happens when we take some of that and we put pen to paper. And, even in my own life, that's been something that I've done pretty consistently over time until the last probably 4 or 5 years. And I really kind of got away from it. And, it was interesting because it came back to me recently that, this was a part of me that I was sort of like neglecting, that I really hadn't honored myself in some ways by allowing myself to let that go. And I think that there's so much healing. And I know this is something that you talk about a lot. There's so much healing that can come from this process. So I want you to speak to that and what that looks like, for you, but what it looks like when you see other people going through that in your workshops.
Yeah, well, first, I think that there's a lot of people in the position that you're expressing right now, where it's like we've let go of that connection, or writing has been a connection for you, right? It's been a way, like a touch point for you to come back to yourself, right? And whether you got really busy, or things you were doing in life, or sometimes when there's just a lot of pain body going on, right? Like we're experiencing in the world right now, a really heavy pain body experience.
Yes.
This division and the dichotomies and all of this stuff is kind of ripping us apart, right? We can tend to go into avoidance of things versus like, how do we embrace the emotion, right? Yes. So I think it's not easy, and yet it's really necessary. So just like raising small children, where, I see my son and he's getting really angry, and I might feel like I want him to just stop that behavior. But I need to realize that I got to take time and be in the process with him. And that's what we need to do for ourselves. And I feel we need to do for other people. A lot of it has to do with where we value our time, and how we're set up in a culture not to value the stopping and the taking time. Process our feelings, to even when you talk about grief and loss and things like that, and many of us are going through grief and loss right now too, right? Yes. And so we don't make time for those things.
So true.
That's in order to process, in order to take time to write. And if I've learned anything about in being a writer that has been enormously valuable for me, is that I have to make myself a priority. I have to make enough time, right? To actually, I mean, this is 330 pages. I really had to make some time. I really had to make some time. But like I'm working on my second memoir now, and I'm just like, and all the writers that are in groups with me, I do online work too. And it's this thing of time. And so all of us are like really going, oh my God, we never learned to honor this kind of time.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And I would, I kind of pose this question to anyone who's listening too. When was the last time you really took time out for yourself to say journal or write down some of your thoughts or your feelings about what's been happening, what's happened over the last year, what you're looking at for this next year, and, what that means to you. And I've got some wonderful people that consistently show up here. I just want to say hi to some of you. Sandy, thank you for being here. And Larry, you're often here and you're always saying hi to each other. I love that. And one of the other things, yes, and Twain, thank you for being here and for sharing. Appreciate that so much. And we hope that these messages are going out. Scott, thank you for being here. We hope that these messages are going out and creating a space for healing. There's a reason why we bring these topics forward, because we feel like there's going to be something better coming. And the way that we get there is by working together, by collaborating and helping each other to make that happen. And so I love the work that you're doing. To me, it's so powerful, and it really encourages people to move into this different space than maybe they've been in, or to revisit it, or to give it more attention. And I think that's really valuable.
I think it's really important, if I can say this. Hi, Brad. Hi, Brad. I think it's a really important conversation for us to have, and to understand that a lot of times we don't go, like, even if you're journaling, or especially if you come to write your story, we don't want to go there because we're like to that vulnerable place, right? And in order to write a good story, yes, we want some light in it, but we want to be honest about the rawness and real things that happen in our experience. That's where we really connect with people. And I think the fear is, if I go there, I might not come back.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we've had, those of us, I mean, I had plenty of traumatic experiences in my early years. My brother died when I was 8. So at 8 years old, I was getting just a huge heaping of grief and learning of what that meant, to lose a family member, and to lose a family member in a tragic way.
Right.
It's become a huge gift in my life, because it's actually part of why I'm such an empathic healer, and my level of understanding for people that have experienced grief is very deep and very wide. But I do know this: we're afraid to go there because we're afraid we might not come back. Yeah. And so this is really an opportunity for us to trust more our power, our courage, our ability to actually revisit emotions and feelings and place voice on them. When we write, we are giving voice to, say, these pockets in the self that have not been heard.
Wow. That's so beautiful. Right.
And then they're heard, and you're releasing energy, and you're freeing. And that's the key, right? Is like knowing that I can go there and I can release this, not stay stuck in it. We want to transcend. We want to go there, transcend it, transform it, right? The grief becomes something else. The grief becomes the lesson, the gift that we are able to hand someone else.
That's so powerful. Well, and again, your book is available, obviously, on Amazon, correct?
We're on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and Goodreads, all those outlet, the online stores, mostly everything online now. And yeah, so if you get Google,
if anybody wants to look it up, it's The Soulful
Child. 12 years in the wilderness. There we go. I'm trying to get a straight angle.
There you go. Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful cover. Yeah. Beautiful picture. And that's you on the cover.
That's me at 3.5 years old. And the amazing thing, if I could just say about this picture, is because I have very few pictures from my childhood, because we didn't have cameras. So really living in the wild, no running water, no electricity, no TV, no cameras. There were no cameras. So on this day, a friend of my mother's was visiting, and it was Thanksgiving Day. And she took this picture of me, but I didn't have the photo. And at 35, I was writing my memoir, and I went to see her. I just reconnected with her. I went to visit her, and I remember she slid the photo across the table, and she said, "I know you're writing your book. I have this picture of you that I think you might want."
I just felt chills all over my body while you're talking about it. That is so beautiful.
That became the book cover. Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. And if they want to find you online, they can also find you at...
Yeah, just Chloe Rachel Gallaway.com. There you go.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
My mom says Rachel is, the other day she said, "Can you just drop the Rachel? Just drop the Rachel, honey. Chloe is so soft and smooth, I thought, what is she talking about? Is that true? I didn't,
I think it works really well. Well, this has been such a joy. I knew it was going to go too fast. Of course, it's gone very quickly, but we will do this again. Thank you so much for being here and sharing part of your story with us and sharing your light and your wisdom. I just am so in gratitude for this time with you.
Oh, thank you, Pamela. Since the moment we talked, it was fun. So let's do it again. And, for everybody out there, I would love to connect with you. And we need each other, and we need healing, and we need transcendence, right? In the world now, we do. So
Yes, absolutely. And anyone who was listening tonight, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing out. And we really appreciate you being here. I appreciate you showing up and just bringing your energy and your light and your love with you and having the opportunity to share these messages out with you. So thank you again for being here and have a wonderful rest of your evening. Good night, everyone.